This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps in Discipleship pastor here at Southridge Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor, and we are in our series, week 2 of our series, Silent but Deadly, where we're talking about some sins that are things that are more inward, but do end up having an outward effect. And this week you covered the topic of hate. And you kind of brought into the whole idea from the very beginning of, Jesus, he said that, we're to love God and love people, that all the commandments really fall under those two things. Yeah. And how you brought an interesting quote that I'll let you kind of
from Bill Maher. I told you there was something I wanted to talk about, and we thought it was the other thing. This is what it was, actually. I'll go ahead and read the quote. So, Jesus makes it very clear what we are to do is to love him with everything we have, and the way that we do that, because these two commands are inseparable. People that only love God but have a hard time loving people are not properly loving God.
Right.
You cannot get away from those two things. They are together. And that being essentially the syllabus of the Christian life, I love this quote from Bill Maher, who is, as antagonistic towards the religious community as humanly possible, probably, other than he doesn't want to kill us like he does. He is in favor of us having our rights to do that. He just finds us to be ridiculous in the process of it. But he said, I was watching this YouTube video, and all it was all these rants that he goes on about religion and faith and all this, and he's pretty brutal. But honestly, I think that some Christians would be well served to find out what other people think of them, because it helps us to really assess ourselves very soberly, to go first off, you need to know why you believe what you believe, because there's people out there like Bill Maher that do not agree with you and find you to be a silly fool for what you do believe.
Right.
And then you also need to know that there's a lot of stuff done in the name of faith and in the name of God that has been drastically detrimental to humanity. Yeah. And if you don't know what those things are, how people feel about them, then you'll just act in ignorance and think oh no, we're always everyone's favorite. No. But he made this comment in this one rant. He said that if you ignore every single thing Jesus commanded you to do, which was to love God supremely and love your neighbor as yourself, that's what he commanded you to do. He says you're not a Christian, you're just auditing, which is a brilliant analogy, because auditing is like when you go to college and you can go to a class and not do the work, but you can oversee it. And I thought, that's the best language that I've been able to hear on this phenomenon of cultural Christianity, these folks that go to church, but their lives do not reflect that their faith is an important value to them whatsoever. Right. This whole idea of auditing, they are showing up for class and then they willfully leave and they do whatever the heck they want the rest of the week until it's time to come back to go to class again. I thought that was brilliant to me. Because even someone like Bill Maher, an ardent atheist, can look at our scriptures and go, you guys don't even understand what this thing is about.
Yeah.
Love your God with everything you are and love people. The way that you love God is by loving what he loves, which is people. He sees that from the outside. But I think I understand why it is that so many people that claim to be Christians seem so hateful, is that they think that God, that they're standing up against evil, against, and here's the thing. There's only one thing that we're called to hate as Christians, and that is evil. We're supposed to hate what God hates. But what most Christians do is, because they don't know how to separate the individual that God loves from the behavior that God hates, that their hate for the behavior ends up being their hate for the person.
Yeah.
They don't know how to separate those two things.
Yeah.
And I know, and on the opposite side of it, the critics of Christianity that say that we're hateful, even when we do this well, we don't get any credit for it, right? So it's very possible for me to hate the, let's say, sexual lifestyle of someone while simultaneously loving that person. And I know that they don't think that that's possible, but it is.
Yeah.
But the reason why they don't think it's possible is because there's a lot of Christians that don't have that ability to separate what they're supposed to hate, which is evil, and what they do hate, which is the person.
Yes.
They always put a face on the hate rather than like, and this is why Christians get called hateful so much. It's like, and then they feel justified in it. Because like, I'll see this like, I'm just standing up for what's right. First off, God doesn't need you to stand up for him. He's good. He's fine all on his own. He doesn't need you. You're not his bouncer. You're not his bodyguard. God's not some fragile little thing that when people say mean stuff about him that he needs you to rise up and take. Like, no, he's good. He's got that. He's not in any need of protection. He did not ask you. He did not say in that command, love God with everything you are. And when people do evil, make sure that you stand up for me and let them know how upset I am with them. No. That's not what he said. He said, and love them as much as you love God.
Yeah.
So, yes, we are supposed to stand against evil. We are to hate evil. We're supposed to hate what God hates. Never once was that a person.
No.
Never once was that a person. Like, I can have a relationship with someone that I think is completely dead wrong, even if their behavior is what I would consider sinful. I can still have a relationship with them. In fact, I have a relationship with tons of people like
including
that.
ourselves, right?
Yes.
And I think, like, what I find interesting is all of these weeks are really going to tie back into that first week, because it really all does go back to that pride. And I say this in so many different, so often in so many different ways, that acceptance doesn't equal agreement. Like, acceptance is saying, like, I accept you as a person and that you have value as a person because you're made in the image of God and you have value.
Yep.
Agreement is something totally, completely different.
Not even close.
And so I don't have to agree with what you do or what you believe, but I can accept you as a valuable person, as a person with value. And
it's funny how our culture changed this though. This is all around one topic mainly. It's all about sexuality. Yeah. That's the only area where we get into this, because there's no one in their right mind that when a Christian goes, yes, it is sinful to do drugs. No one goes, oh, that's very hateful towards those drug users.
Right.
Nope, nobody does that. That's silliness. Nobody does. It's only around this one area of sexual immorality and what the Christian standard and sexual ethic is compared to what the worldly standard is, especially today. Yeah. It's so interesting. Like, you put it into any other standard, you go and you don't end up with that whatsoever. And for us personally, it's the hypocrisy of Christians is what makes them look so hateful. Yeah. Like, the same people that will stand at the end of a pride parade. And I read is it Colton Bach?
Yeah.
Caleb?
The Messy Grace.
Yeah.
Caleb, I think.
Caleb Colton Bach. His mom was in the gay lifestyle, and
both his parents.
They would march in the parades.
Yeah. Christians
at the end of those parades would spray urine on them from water guns.
Yeah.
In the name of Jesus? That's absurd. Awful. But yet, then to think, okay, is that Christian at the end of the pride parade holding those signs, spraying urine on people that Jesus loves? Yeah. That person better be morally perfect. Yeah. Because in their own life, that would be, I would not be shocked if that's the type of dude or person that just goes home and cheats on his wife or beats his wife. Right.
Absolutely.
If you would abuse someone here, there's no, so again, but for them, they're like, this is so heinous to God, I've got to stand up against it. But you don't go and, even your own pride that would make you go stand at the end of a parade and pick at someone.
Right. And think that
even that pride is sin.
That's your job to do.
And I'm not saying both of those are sins and both of them need changed and corrected, but it's so frustrating. Even because this all surrounds sexual ethics normally, whenever we start talking about hate and all, yada, 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 it frustrates me that so many Christians are so vile towards the LGBTQIA plus community, while themselves, if they hit a rough patch in their marriage, would divorce their spouse at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Like there's no, like, they don't have the same. Oh, but God hates divorce every bit as much as he hates homosexuality.
Yes.
He doesn't, again, not the people,
right?
The activity.
Yeah.
He doesn't hate divorced people.
Right.
He hates divorce. Like, you have to separate those two things, and it is possible to do that. But, like, these same Christians that are so upset over these alternative lifestyles don't even blink an eye when their best friend at church goes through a divorce. They don't hold them accountable whatsoever and go, listen, this is not acceptable behavior for a Christian whatsoever. Because everybody's always looking for a loophole. Is there any way, according to the Bible, that I could get divorced? Like, what are the ways that why don't we start asking the question when it comes to that, like, is there any biblical mandate to stay, right? Like to fight it out and stay, to show the steadfastness and overcoming power of love,
right? The
way the gospel, like, it's just like, I hate the hypocrisy of, when we set one standard here. Like, for me, I can't look at someone else and hate them based on what they do, because I would have to hate myself, because I got my own crap going on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I've got all this stuff that, like, has to be, like, sanctified inside of me still. Yeah. So I can't treat people like that.
Right. And I think one of the ways, like, that, because at the end of this, you brought in the idea about the Father and how God is a loving Father. And here's the deal, like, what we have to think about, like, those of you listening who have kids. I mean, when my kids behave badly, I'm not mad at them as the child. I'm mad at their choice to behave wrong, right? Like, we can separate those things for our kids, right? We don't just suddenly, like, our kids are wild and crazy and running through the aisles at Michael's and decide that we're just going to drop our kids because of their poor behavior. No, we decide to have those conversations and love them through that and understand that behavior does not necessarily identify them. It's a moment. It's a season, it's whatever. And if we look at people in that same aspect with their behaviors, like, and begin to separate it and, like, look at them in that way, then it becomes something different. And this is the, like, thing, even with my, like, the language that we use with our kids, that I'm trying to make sure that we're doing better on, is separating that we're upset with that behavior, that choice, not them, like, that we still love them. We don't like this behavior, and it's the same thing. But to think that, like, we could treat somebody poorly and hatefully and think that that's gonna change their mind is absolutely a pride thing.
Like, a lot of these silent but deadly things we've been talking about, what I'm coming to realize is these are the areas of self-deception in our life. The reason why I consider them silent sins is because the more I study it, it's not really silent to everyone around you.
No.
It's silent to you. Like, you don't realize. Like, week one, people didn't realize the amount of pride until I walked through a list full of things. That's what I kept hearing from people was when I went through this list of behaviors, I was going, oh, my word. I am full of pride. And most of those people before that would have thought, I'm a very humble person. Hate is the same way. Like, you think, no, I'm standing up for what's right. I'm not hating. I'm loving God so much. And it's like, well, listen, you love God best when you love what he loves. And so what you're doing right now to belittle somebody, like, and the way that you treat people is the way that you feel about them. So when you go, oh, I just don't like them. It's not that I hate them. I don't like them. No, listen. That's self-deception. If you can treat someone like they don't matter, you do not love them.
Right.
Period. You do not love them. That's why I was kind of pretty upfront about, like, when it comes to politics. If you make statements like all Republicans blank, all Democrats blank.
Oh, yeah.
And you can just belittle a bunch of strangers.
Right.
oh, I'm just standing up for what's right, or no, I just don't like them, I just disagree with them. No. At the minute that you belittle their humanity by calling them ignorant or stupid or whatever it is, you are hating them.
Yeah.
It's not just I disagree with them. That's because I can disagree with someone and still respectfully like honor them as a person. But that's not what I see a lot of people doing. It's not respectful disagreement. It's like, I'm going to throw you down, question your humanity. I'm going to question your morality. I'm going to question whether or not you even have any inherent worth because you see the world like this. That is not disagreement. That is not anything other than hate. But it's self-deception. Again, like this week I'm going to be talking about envy, and I'm going, this might be one of the trickiest ones to figure out. Because let's say that we go out and we buy a house that's too big for us and you can't afford it. And you go, why did you do that? And we'll go, well, my family needed the extra space. We really like the neighborhood. It's got good schools for the kids. And it goes, no. Come on. Why did you really do that? Oh, because everyone that I hang out with has a house like this. And I just wanted to have something that I could be proud of with the rest of my, like, all of these silent things are so self-deceptive. Like we don't know when we've crossed into envy until we're like really honest and we go, yeah, I wear the clothes that I wear because of the people around me. I make the decisions that I make because of the people around me. I'm unhappy with myself because everyone else has what I want. Like, and we call it all sorts of different things other than what it is. And it's the same thing with hate. It's like hate is like, I would guarantee if you were to ask people, 95% of the people coming into church on this past Sunday would have said, there's not a single shred of hate in my heart whatsoever. And I would go, all right, well, explain this behavior then. Oh, no, that's, I'm standing up for what's right. Oh, no, I just disagree with them. I still love them. I just, it's self-deception. And until we just call it what it really is, we'll never be able to get rid of it.
And I love how, so you taught from 1 John 4, and I love how, in part of that, like you talked about how the Spirit of God is what, we have the Spirit of God that equips us to do what we think we can't do. Like a lot of us will struggle with this, but the wonderful thing is that we don't actually have to do this by ourselves and in our own power and in our own strength. Like if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, you have the Spirit of God living within you, which then creates helps you develop the fruit of the Spirit, right? Which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And those things can grow within you. The more that you practice, the more that you lean on the Spirit rather than your flesh, that is what's going to make a big difference in this, is that like recognizing it, like calling it what it is. That's what I think is going to be super helpful through the series, is hopefully like we will be open enough to allow the Spirit to speak to us and call out, like naming those things for what they are. That's
what Jesus did. Like like when you go to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, he did not mince words when he talked about these sorts of topics. When he talked about pride, when he talked about like what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks, like lust, he didn't sidestep that and go like, oh, he was like always upping the ante. Like he called it what it was instead of like, and I think he knew that we would have this propensity as humans to go, I'm going to sidestep this and go, it's not really hate. It's just strong dislike. It's it's strong dislike. It's your behavior says how you feel about people, period. If you're not acting loving towards them, it's not that it's not like dislike. I mean, Jesus even like in the Sermon on the Mount, he goes, it's like, he said, to kill someone is wrong. That's what the law says. But I say, if you even have hate in your heart towards them, it's the same as murder. So Jesus goes, you think it's cool that you don't kill people. I'm telling you not to hate people.
Right.
And even more so than that, he goes on, it's like, I'm actually calling you to actively love them. So we play these like little church games.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to me because like I'll hear like horror stories of what people that are Christians do. Like people always make jokes about like board meetings at churches like just turn so nasty and stuff. It's like, how? Well, it's because you have a bunch of self-deceived people inside the church that all they do is check a bunch of religious boxes, but they're not being transformed because they don't know anything about the Holy Spirit coming in to actually make a difference in their life, to actually experience transformation. Like they do not get that at all. That's missing. They're tithing, they go to church, they're serving.
Right.
I mean, they'll do all that stuff. Except for experience true transformation from the gospel, because they actually don't think they need it because they're checking so many boxes.
Right.
They're at a point where God now owes them, rather than them needing to submit to God. It's
a dangerous game. And
self-deception, man. It's killing the church.
And
I don't know how to get people to wake up to it.
Well, here's the thing. Like, there's so much now, like, and because of psychology and all those things of, like, hey, let's name the emotion that you're feeling. Let's bring a name to that emotion that you're feeling in this thing so you can work through it in the right way. That is the very same thing we're doing with this, is let's bring the actual name forward for what it is that we're doing, how we're behaving, how we're treating people, what we're dealing with. Let's bring the name so then now we can deal with it.
Yeah, then it can be changed.
Yes. And so it's just that. And like, and yeah, it can be like, oh my gosh, like we don't want to do it. And we may, have a little bit of fear of like guilt or those kind of things. But this is just like, allow the Spirit to convict you so that you can change. Like that's what conviction is. Like there's not condemnation here. Like that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to condemn people. You're trying to bring it forward so that we can be aware, so that we can experience that true change that we need to experience, so that we can be that church that our community can't live without. Because until we get these things right, we are not going to do that well on the outside. I mean,
the amount of people that I think after this week, when we talk about envy, it'll be like, no. I just like nice things. And that's the way that we self-deceive ourselves into certain lifestyles. No, that's not what it is. You saw someone else that had this, and so now you want it.
Yeah, like contentment is...
You won't be able to change it. Yeah. I have this great illustration from a sermon like a long time ago. We were in the series Climate Change. I still remember we were talking about emotions. That until you own something, you can't actually change it, right? Whenever I was renting my house, when Megan and I first got married, the cable guy came over to set our cable up. And he said, he's like, well, you don't have, this sort of cable here. I would have to come through this front wall to bring you the cable. I said, well, go ahead and do that. He goes, are you renting this townhouse? I said, I am. He goes, well, I can't drill this wall. I can't change anything about this house because you don't own it. Right. And I thought, my God, that's the reason why so many people feel trapped by their emotions and by their sins and by their proclivities is because they do not own them. Right. And until they own them, they'll never be able to change them. Yeah. That's why if you don't own your hate, you're just going to go on hating, but you're going to call it something else. And here's what I like shudder to say this, because I wish I had more time to think on it before I say it, because I feel like I hinted at it Sunday, but like I feel pretty solid in saying this. But I don't want people to be misled either. I said hate was in a different category of everything else that we talk about at church. Because according to 1 John chapter 4, this is not one of those things that you can struggle with and be a Christian. Right? Like you might be a Christian and struggle with lust. You might be a Christian and struggle with greed. You might be a Christian and struggle with gossiping. Not that those things are acceptable by any means whatsoever, that you should not be seeking to crucify those. But the one area where there is not, no. If you have hate in your heart, you're not a Christian. That is very, very scary for a self-deceived
I think it goes back to that, that text in, is it Matthew? Yeah, Matthew, about not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Like I think with some of these, especially hate, if we don't get to the point where we understand like the true dynamic of it, we have run that risk of ending up being one of those. Yeah. And
I mean, the passage in 1 John makes it clear.
It's scary.
If you don't love, you're not a Christian.
Yeah.
Like when Jesus talks about the other things that you might struggle with, when the New Testament does, he doesn't say that, like, hey, to struggle with lust is to prove that you don't know God. That's not in there.
Right.
But if you do not love, you do not know God. That is, it's like there's a different category when it comes to hate, which is what worries me so much. And again, it's not that the New Testament, and I want to be very careful because I don't want it to sound like I'm preaching some sort of like once saved, always saved, like it doesn't matter what you struggle with type deal. But I'm just saying there's a lot of grace for your struggles in Christianity that God will work with you. God will, but hate is not one of those areas. It's just, hate is kind of like an all or nothing thing according to 1 John 4.
Yeah.
You got that in your heart, you don't know God.
Yeah.
That's just flat out, you don't know God.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's not something to be messing around with. It's not something to sit here and self-deceive yourself and go, oh yeah, everything is okay. It's strong dislike, or it's just disagreement, or, you know, they're just not my type of people, like whatever it is. No, listen, guys, hate is not something to mess around with because it is a salvation issue. If there is any hate in your heart, it is evidence that the Spirit of God is not living in you. And there's not any other vice or sin or proclivity that we will talk about at church that is in that category other than unbelief. Yeah. Because hate and unbelief are pretty much bedfellows, right? They just go right along with each other. They're the only two things that would put you outside of the Christian faith immediately. Like, not like, oh, you know, like, I'm not saying that lust and all these other things won't land you outside the Christian faith at some point in your life.
Right.
But it seems like, according to the scriptures, these are things that we work through, that God helps us through, that we overcome. Whereas with hate, it's like an all or nothing type of thing, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
And that's why we can't mess around with it.
Yeah. Now, final question before we leave, and it kind of ties into a little bit of what we were talking about at the beginning, I feel like, but you talked about how like fear and hate kind of go along with each other, and how like we fear because we don't know. Yeah. And what we were talking about at the beginning is like educating ourselves and what other, like, why other people think, what other people think, what other people believe about it. Like those kind of things will help us in these things. Education goes a very long way to get rid of fear and hate. Yeah.
Can I give you a really good example that'll probably upset, I don't know, 80% of the people that listen, or will ever possibly listen? 9/11 happens for most Americans. Let's just be honest. Most Americans. Yeah. This is their first encounter with something like this. I know stuff happened back in the 90s and some of the old, but I'm saying this is the first run-in that most people have with what was deemed radical Islam. Yeah. Out of ignorance of what they do not know about these people, there became a fear of these people. Yeah. And then there became a hate of these people. Yeah. Right? Absolutely. This is what happened. I mean, it's similarly with COVID and Asian population. Yeah, yeah. Well, there was a reason why, like in World War II, that the Japanese that were in the Americas and other areas were dealt with in a certain way, because ignorance always leads to fear. Fear always leads to hate. And because it's something that we don't understand, therefore we fear it. And so therefore then we end up hating it. This is the way that the whole Western population convinced themselves that slavery was a good idea, was because in their ignorance about, these, you know, folks that we don't know them, we've never seen them, but now we have these ideas that they are less than we are. And out of that ignorance, they became fearful of them. Out of that fearfulness, they hated them, and then they systematically hated them. Yeah. As a result. So all of our hate, again, it's the same thing with the LGBTQIA population. Why do people that hate them? Because it all starts off with ignorance, that they do not know at all what these people are about, even though they think that they know what these people are about. Yeah. Oh, that's like horrible things about these people. Like, I'm not even going to bring them up here. Yeah. But it comes from ignorance. You don't know nothing about that person. You don't know anything about that person's intentions. And also to treat a whole community, like to treat one individual as if the whole community has the same motive and intentions in their life, is an ignorant way to live life. Absolutely. And out of that ignorance, then you become fearful. Oh, what are they going to do? What are they going to do to our country? What are they going to do to my kids? You know, like, and out of that fear, enough fear builds up, and then that becomes hate. It always follows this path. We've seen it with slavery, with the LGBTQI community. We've seen it with people of other religions like Islam and things, where a hate is built up, and it all starts because you treated a whole group, like an individual, like a whole group of people, rather than sitting down and having a conversation and going, all right, it happens in our politics today. The reason why the right hates the left hates the right, is they all have these caricatures of what each other are like, but they don't actually know what each other are like.
Right.
Because you know what? I know a lot of people on the right that in certain areas they're on the left, and some people on the left that in certain areas they're on the right. Yeah. But yet we treat people as if they're completely monolithic, that they are only one thing. And it's because you're not having conversations with these people to understand what they actually think, to understand what they actually say, how they see the world. And so out of our ignorance, and we are only going to continue to get more ignorant the more disconnected we become as a culture. We will only become more ignorant, more fearful, more hateful, because the rise of social media is leading to disconnection. I know that we think that it's connecting us with all these people. It's like we don't know how to have conversations anymore with people. We just fight with straw men constantly, and all of that ignorance. Yes, ignorance around COVID was a great example. We didn't know anything about COVID. We didn't know anything about masks and vaccines. Why did that end up so contentious and filled with hate? Because it all started with ignorance. Because we didn't have good information, and we didn't seek out good information, and then we didn't have conversations with people like, hey, well, why do you wear a mask, and why do you not wear a mask, and what do you it's all ignorance. And again, Christians, we just have to understand that hate is not something to play around with. It is in a category, as far as God is concerned, all on its own, on par with rejecting the gospel. And it is a very serious situation. So I preached it passionately, not because I'm angry over it, but because I recognize the seriousness of the situation, that you cannot self-deceive yourself in this area, or you are going to end up as the people of Matthew, what was that, Matthew 7? Lord, Lord. And he goes, look, man, I don't even know you. My goal as a pastor is to make sure that people that sit under my teaching for any amount of time do not have that experience. Yeah,
absolutely. Awesome. Well, next week we'll be back here with another great podcast for you. We're diving deeper into envy. And so it's going to be another great week. And again, if you have not liked or subscribed this channel, make sure that you do so. That way you don't miss out on any more content, any new content. And we hope that this has helped you to take some practical next steps in your faith journey.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.